Hi everyone, I'm Michelle France. Thank you very much for taking the time to view my presentation titled Land of Divine Light, an exhibition of 19th century American Luminism. Landscape painting in the 19th century was dominated by the romantic, sublime, and the allegorical narrative. However, existing within this greater tradition, and often overlooked, is the style of Luminism. In many ways, the Luminist style was closely aligned with the dominant attitudes of the American people during the mid-19th century. It was hopeful, expansive, and celebrated the transcendental beauty of nature, finding a spiritual element in the rugged vistas of the country's untamed wilderness. The purpose of this exhibition is to illustrate the spiritual overtones inherent within this style and examine the properties deemed definitively luminist. Within the course of this endeavor, my hope is to bring forth evidence which expands the constraints of Luminism to include works by such artists as Thomas Cole and Asher B. Durand, whose contributions may otherwise be disqualified based upon the time frame they were created or a lack of consistency in the artist's adherence to the style within their greater body of work. The collection of works in this room have been selected based upon their exemplary representation of the heavens within the vein of Luminism. Known for showcasing the myriad effects of light on the diverse lands, seas, and skies of the United States, the significance of Luminism within the greater tradition of American landscape painting is often overlooked, a style unique in its illustration of the burgeoning country as a natural manifestation of divine creation. Each of the works contained herein share a commonality in their inference of a spiritual element existing within the natural world they so carefully depict. This room features the work of Frederick Edwin Church prominently, showing the range in which the artist worked. From the subdued rose and burnt orange palette of Looking West from Olana of 1864 to the fiery reds and brilliant yellows of Twilight in the Wilderness from 1860. Also included is Thomas Moran's Dusk Wings, also of 1860, which epitomizes the landscapes of Luminism by way of the artist's treatment of light and its atmospheric effects. These images are not only valued for their exceptional beauty, but for the spiritual undertones they so eloquently exhibit. Trained by Thomas Cole, Frederick Church was an enthusiastic explorer, traveling to Europe, the tropics, Canada, and the subarctic in search of nature's magnificence. Looking West from Olana from 1864 is an excellent example of Church's capacity for expressing realism in his composition's depth of field and his proficient handling of light's atmospheric effects. Designated a historical site in 1966, Olana is the artist's beloved New York State farm, which overlooks the Hudson River and Catskill Mountains. Church's Twilight in the Wilderness was painted at the height of the artist's career, during which he produced a number of large-scale exhibition pieces. Contributing to the grandeur of Twilight, the massive size of the canvas allows for the brilliance of the fiery landscape to become all the more immersive and captivating. Church's rendering of intensely hued clouds, partially obscuring the blue sky above, show a sensitivity for the subtleties of nature. When combined with the artist's realistic depiction of depth, the result is a picturesque illustration of nature's vibrant palette. Widely renowned as one of the best landscape painters of the 19th century, Thomas Moran was the fifth child of Thomas and Mary Moran, born into a long line of handloom weavers. The textile industry was hit especially hard by the mechanical advancements of the Industrial Revolution, and the repercussions were felt most significantly by the factory towns surrounding Manchester. Known as one of the worst slums in England, the conditions of Moran's hometown of Bolton were so deplorable that the artist immigrated to the United States in 1842, with his wife and 7 children joining him in 1844. The vast majority of Moran's work is a homage to the natural beauty of his adopted country, celebrating the joy and splendor of the American landscape. The noble peaks of the United States bestowed an enormous amount of inspiration upon the landscape painters of the 19th century. Adventurous artists risked life and limb in hopes of capturing the splendor of America's magnificent crags. While realism is generally accepted as the preferred mode of representation in Luminism, it is often romanticized or enhanced to increase the visual appeal and sublimity of a scene. Of notable importance within the vein of Luminism is a distinct lack of the artist's presence in the composition. Nature is treated as a subject of nobility and grandeur, existing independently of the artist's brushstroke. This room examines the spectrum of luminous realism, from the snow-capped peaks of Bierstadt's Cathedral Rocks, Yosemite Valley, California, of 1872, to the artist's earlier piece, Among the Sierra Nevada, California, of 1868, which shows an overt romanticizing of the subject matter. Finally, the inclusion of Thomas Moran's The Mountain of the Holy Cross from 1875 serves as a stunning example of the explicit realism seen throughout much of Luminism and reaffirms its commitment to the betrayal of a divine presence in the natural world. A German immigrant, Albert Bierstadt, traveled to Yosemite several times throughout his career, captivating the rugged beauty of the mountainous terrain. Cathedral Rocks of 1872 is one of the most accomplished sketches of Yosemite produced by the artist and made significant by Bierstadt's choice to depict a winter scene, something uncommon in 19th century landscapes. The artist has succeeded in capturing the majesty and solitude of the frigid scene, with the only warmth emanating from the scarce sunlight reflecting off the craggy peaks. Albert Bierstadt is best known for his grandiose images of the American West's unspoiled wilderness. Despite subtle creative liberties taken by the artist, Bierstadt's artwork captures the inherent wonder of the glorious landscapes he emulates, speaking to a spiritual element existing within nature. In Among the Sierra Nevada, California, of 1868, the artist has imbued his composition with an idyllic harmony, sheltering the scene within an orb of radiant sunlight. The dark, intensifying clouds on the periphery signify the ominous power of nature, commanding respect in exchange for sublime beauty. Nestled deep within the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, the iconic cross on the bald rock face of the Mountain of the Holy Cross is formed by two massive perpendicular crevices, which epitomize the name bestowed upon it by Spanish missionaries who sought to Christianize the native tribes of the region. Filled with snow year-round, these crevices feed Holy Cross Creek, which is featured prominently in the foreground of Moran's composition. The Mountain of the Holy Cross from 1875 exemplifies the artist's ability to capture the finest details of the natural world, from the shimmering halo of mist encompassing the mountaintop to the lichen-covered rocks on the banks of the flowing creek. The harmonious relationship between the earth and man provides the basis for the works curated for this particular room, emphasizing a common betrayal of the land as a source of divine bestowal. The presence of Thomas Cole's The Oxbow from 1836 in this collection, despite predating a mature realization of Luminism by over a decade, is intended to suggest a possible origin of the style, as the composition's interaction between the sunlit sky and receding storm shows signs of the luminous early experiments with atmospheric effects. Similar to Monet's study of haystacks, Martin Johnson Heade was preoccupied with the changes of a particular landscape over time. In his subdued Newburyport Meadows from 1876, the light is indicative of the elements and the hour and is one of over 120 works by Heade featuring the cultivated salt marshes of the Northeast. Finally, Frederick Edwin Church's View near Stockbridge, Massachusetts of 1847 rounds out the room with a pastoral landscape bathed in the warm glow of the heavens. Despite romantic overtones, the artist's delicate rendering of fading sunlight over the lush valley asserts its rightful inclusion within the luminous style. Martin Johnson Heade was a member of the Hudson River School, joining the renowned school upon moving to New York in the fall of 1858. Despite having one of the longest careers among American painters of the 19th century, Heade received little artistic acclaim during his lifetime, only being recognized for his substantial and varied body of work towards the mid-20th century. The salt marshes of the Northeast are a recurring subject for Heade, embodying a reverential communion between nature's bounty and man's reaping of it. Showing a preoccupation with environmental changes over time, Newburyport Meadows of 1876 reveals the artist's careful rendering of light and shadow, purposefully referring to the time of day in which the composition was painted. Perhaps the most well-known American painter of the 19th century, Thomas Cole is considered the father of the Hudson River School. While most of Cole's work falls outside the bounds of Luminism due to an undeniable evidence of the artist within the composition and blatantly narrative subject matter, a few select works foreshadow the style with respect to the artist's treatment of light and atmosphere. In The Oxbow of 1836, Despite a subtle idealization of the scene, Cole has skillfully rendered a passing thunderstorm over the cultivated valley below, carefully depicting the lingering precipitation and delicate play of intermittently filtered light on the farmland and surrounding hillside. As a result of his close mentorship with Thomas Cole, Frederick Edwin Church is widely regarded as the leader of the second generation of the Hudson River School painters. Seeking to convey the poetic beauty of the natural world, Church was adept at achieving realism in his compositions. The artist treated his landscapes with scientific precision, taking only slight creative liberties in his manipulation of a scene's coloration to make it more vivid and visually appealing. In The Artist's Pastoral View near Stockbridge, Massachusetts, of 1847, Church has rendered a scene bespeaking a harmonious relationship between the fertile land and its inhabitants, bestowing the valley with a luminosity which appears to descend from the heavens. Some of the most defining works within the vein of Luminism were the dramatic seascapes of the East Coast, which showed a transition towards compositional simplicity and subtle abstract inclinations. The assemblage of images in this room not only showcase but exemplify the vacillation between intensity and stillness, a common theme throughout the luminous style. Showing a preference for panoramic vistas, Martin Johnson Head's Twilight Singing Beach of 1863 and Approaching Storm, Beach near Newport of 1867, both display vast expanses of pigment-saturated atmosphere uniting on the horizon with inky oceanic depths. In each composition, rock escarpments recede along the unoccupied shoreline, and distant crystalline waters are punctuated with seafaring vessels, intended by the artist as points of reference for gauging the distance being represented. Finally, Sunset over New York Bay of 1878, the exhibition's sole work by Sanford R. Gifford, closes the room. Considered one of Luminist's most prominent artists, Gifford's depiction of a glorious sunset over the congested harbor finds a delicate balance, creating both a historical record and celestial exaltation. Despite being a prominent member of the Hudson River School, Head eventually rejected many of the standard compositional elements of the school in favor of a more minimalistic approach to his landscapes. Eliminating anchoring foliage in the foreground, a signature feature of the Hudson River School, scenes such as Twilight Singing Beach of 1863 show the artist's transition towards more simplified compositions. In Twilight, Head shows a competency for uniting vast expanses of sea and sky, attentively reflecting the warm hues of the sunset on the water, with the softly breaking waves and passing clouds providing a glowing contrast to the subdued palette. In conjunction with his preoccupation with the salt marshes of the Northeast, Head focused a great deal of his creative energies on perfecting his depiction of the New England coastline. His seascapes, in particular those featuring thunderstorms of varying intensity, have become some of the most defining works of the Luminist style. In Approaching Storm, Beach near Newport of 1867, the artist has captured a moment of ominous stillness just before the impending storm unleashes its fury. Leaving only the slightest hint of blue sky visible in the upper right corner, Head's rendering of the building cumulonimbus clouds shows a skillful handling of light and atmosphere, leaving little question as to why Approaching Storm is one of the artist's most beloved and widely recognized works. Sanford Robinson Gifford was a native of Hudson, New York, and is recognized as a leading luminist within the Hudson River School. Instinctively drawn to natural vistas reflective of divine creation, the artist maintained a sense of tonal purity and ecological truth in his compositions, letting the intrinsic splendor of a scene imbue his images with a poetic quality. In Sunset over New York Bay of 1878, Gifford has adeptly captured a historical panorama set beneath a brilliant heavenly display. The artist's vividly hued sky is not overly saturated. The setting sun reflects naturally on the rippling water below and illuminates the passing clouds as it slowly sinks below the horizon. Contrasting the old traditions with new innovations, Gifford uses the passing steam-powered ships on the horizon to represent both era and expanse, while the sailboats in the foreground enhance the stillness of the scene. The pieces curated for this space demonstrate a proclivity for representing distance through a precise treatment of light, allowing its atmospheric effects to become a tool for measurement. Tatterskill Clove of 1866 by Asher B. Durand shows the artist immense talent for creating atmospheric perspective. Notably, Durand has removed all traces of the artist's presence from the composition, and when combined with his unwavering commitment to environmental realism, affirms the work's placement within Luminism. Selected for its stunning representation of the infamous pass, Albert Bierstadt's Donner Lake from the Summit of 1873 commemorates the generations of travelers who have struck out into the wilderness. Juxtaposing the minuscule scale of the railway with the immensity of the natural surroundings, Bierstadt extols the monumentality of nature and man's infinitesimal place within it. Concluding the exhibition is Shroon Mountain of 1838 by Thomas Cole. Narrowing the perceived distance from the viewer to the mountain peak, Cole's utilization of techniques predating the later generation of Luminists show him to be an influential predecessor of the style. Asher Brown Durand ultimately made the transition from engraving to painting upon receiving several commissions from Lumen Reed, a prominent sponsor of the arts. Gradually gaining prominence within the tradition of American landscape painting, Durand eventually co-founded the National Academy of Design with close friend Thomas Cole in 1826. Durand and Cole often traveled together, resulting in an overlap in many of their vistas, though Durand's compositions tend to be much truer to nature and a closer imitation of the actual scene. In Tatterskill Clove of 1866, the artist has resisted dramatizing nature, instead allowing the rugged environment of the Catskills to be the sole object of appreciation, illustrating the expansive view through the skillful depiction of filtered light over the receding peaks, giving the impression of distance and depth. Commissioned by Collis P. Huntington, magnate of the Central Pacific Railroad, Donner Lake from the Summit of 1873 was intended to commemorate the highest peak of the railroad's passage through the High Sierras. However, the tycoon initially refused the finished painting due to the railroad's lack of prominence in the scene. It is easily overlooked on the far right, being thoroughly overshadowed by the sensational beauty of the vast mountains and glistening lake. The Donner Lake region gained notoriety as a result of the gruesome fate of the Donner Party, whose California-bound wagon train was trapped by the elements in the winter of 1846. Thomas Cole's Shroon Mountain of 1838 serves as an allegorical image of man's endeavor through the wilderness, foreboding yet sublimely beautiful with soft light cascading over a fiery autumnal landscape. The artist has delicately rendered a distant rainstorm, with sunlight streaming through the precipitation and casting a luminescent glow on the wooded hills below. Shroon Mountain looms in the distance, haloed with billowing clouds. Its peak is starkly contrasted against the bright sky, acting as a symbol analogous to the struggle of conquering one's environment. Thank you very much for taking the time to view my presentation. I will post a few questions in conjunction with this post, and I will look forward to reading your responses. Thank you.